I'm sure many of us have a favorite passage from the Scriptures, particularly the New Testament or especially the Gospels. And one of my favorite Gospel passages is the one that we just heard from St. Matthew about the multiplication of the loaves and the fishes. It's a favorite because it shows how well Jesus shared in our humanity and how he shared his divinity with us by his great compassion, healing, care, and concern. Before this passage, Jesus had just learned about the death of his cousin, John the Baptist. And so he withdrew in a boat to a deserted place to be alone with just a few of his disciples. And he desired some quiet time just to reflect on the life and the mission of John, as well as his own mission and what direction he was to go in. And so the crowds heard about Jesus' departure by boat, and they hiked by foot along the Sea of Galilee, hoping to intersect with the place that Jesus would dock. And the Sea of Galilee is only about 13 miles long and about 8 miles wide. You can see across it, and today you can drive around that Sea of Galilee in about an hour's time. So when the Lord docked near the shore, he saw a vast crowd. And we heard that his heart was moved with pity for them, and he began to cure those that were ill. Evening then was beginning to settle in, and the disciples felt it was time to send the people off so that they could get some food for themselves at the villages nearby. What the disciples saw was a problem. The problem was a lack of food to feed such a vast crowd of people. But what Jesus saw was an opportunity to share God's goodness and God's graciousness. So he told his disciples there was no need to send the people away, rather to give them some food that they had in order to feed the people. But all they had, as we heard, were 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Then taking those 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, Jesus looked up to heaven. And he said a blessing. He broke the loaves of bread and gave them to the disciples, who in turn gave them to the people. This action points back to a God who fed the Israelites in the desert many years before the time of Christ. And it points forward to the actions of the Last Supper. And it points ultimately to the messianic banquet, where all who eat will be perpetually satisfied in the kingdom of heaven. And finally, we heard there was such an abundance of food for all those people who ate and were satisfied that the leftover fragments filled some 12 baskets full. What struck me in this passage today were the 5 loaves being blessed, broken, and then shared by Jesus. And just as Jesus' body and blood is blessed, broken, and shared at every Mass, so we are called ourselves to this same possibility in our own lives. As members of the Church, the body of Christ, we are to recognize our blessedness, allow ourselves to be broken, and then to share ourselves with others. And 2 of these 3 statements are pretty straightforward. We all have some idea what it means to be blessed in our lives from time to time. In the sharing part, we also know by our being there for others, or others being there for us, to help one another when we are able. But the one statement that causes the most difficulty for any follower of Christ is that breaking part of discipleship. That's a tough one. What does that mean? How do we do it? What does it look like? And there's no easy answer for that breaking part of discipleship, since it is so different from person to person. What needs to be broken in you and in me? Is it unloving attitudes, an inability to forgive? Is it feelings of superiority, walls of jealousy, an ego perhaps out of control? What needs to be broken in you and me? Is it laziness or resentment or an inclination towards revenge? A presumption that we are the center of the universe? What keeps us from living generous, other-centered lives? What keeps us from truly being Eucharist to one another, truly being Christ for one another? What needs to be broken in you and in me? The apostles of Jesus early on were always concerned about their own importance and how they ranked in Jesus' mind. And over time, they began themselves to allow their hearts and their lives to be transformed by that power and grace of God. The instinct to look out for number one was broken in each one of them, and incredible things happened through them. By the Lord, with the Lord, in the Lord, and for the Lord. The miracle of loaves and fishes may have happened a long, long time ago. But we can share in that miracle today in so many ways and in so many circumstances in our own lives. So at this Eucharist, in which we call to mind Christ's body being broken for us and his blood poured out for us, let us allow God to break us so that he becomes first and foremost in our hearts and in our lives, thereby transforming us, and through us, transforming those who are around us.